Yeah, man. So what can you tell our friends out there to encourage them during this difficult time we're all going through?
Well, I look at it now. I come at life from a faith-based perspective, and I don't know how people can make it through times like this without help from what I would consider a spiritual help from God. For
Uh-huh.
me, it's been manna from heaven. It's just been, I have no idea how all these things have worked out. Where 6 months into COVID, we have the same amount of money. It makes no sense. All my jobs went away, but all these little things happened, and I totally give credit to God for it. So I may be an idiot because of it, but I've got the proof. The first step was my TV show. I was working on One Day at a Time, and I had a lot of fun over at Sony, but it had to stop
Yeah.
6 or 7 episodes into their whole series. But the studio paid the crew for 4 extra shows. That was money that came out of nowhere. My dry bar comedy special dropped, and somehow interest in all my material on Spotify and other places started picking up. And I literally went from there's a group that Nick and I use called CD Baby that gives us residuals for
Yeah.
our comedy, and they put it on again all those kind of channels, iTunes and everything else. I was like you, I was making 120 bucks, $95 a month. Somehow over the last 4 months, $10,000 worth of residuals have come in, and I think it all comes from dry bar comedy getting me enough exposure. And then my wife and I call it manna from heaven, but also just it's just like a rowboat coming by. You know, that's old story. If it's a storm and God sends a rowboat and you say, okay, here it is. My wife had a job for a little while, it didn't quite work out, but
Mhm.
something else is going to come along, whether it's the PPP loan that you and I talked about, all the money
Right, right.
situation there,
Mhm.
or a stimulus package, or unemployment, or a gig here. One of those fortunate things. It's like, okay, I'll take it. I
Yeah.
did a big comedy thing this last weekend as a fundraiser, but the technology was so bad on their part, a lot of the people couldn't hear what I had to say. And so I guess I would, and then I saw one of their testimonials in the fundraiser, and it was so echoey, I couldn't understand what they were saying. So they said, we're going to scrap it and do the whole thing again, and we'll pay you again. It's like, well,
Nice.
okay, I guess I'll take that.
Yes.
So the encouragement is, don't get discouraged. That no matter what you do, just keep falling forward, and something somehow will work out. For me, I wake up and I work and I work and I do work on my book, and I work on converting my book into my one man show, and I work on my stand up comedy class, or I work on another idea, or just do some stand up comedy. But by doing that, work generates work.
But
But I'm going to add on to that. It's the seed you plant today that you have no idea when it's going to come back to help you. I became, not certainly not close friends. I don't mean that at all. But I work with Norman Lear, who started All in the Family and so many, the Jeffersons, so many great shows back in the 70s. And so he did a couple sitcoms early in the 90s where I was the warm up comic. And so when he rebooted One Day at a Time, a decade later, he called me up and asked and said, and the producer said, you're the first one we called. Norman said, we got to get Robert. And then I worked with Carrie Leiser, a producer who did Old Christine. Loved her. She's a great lady, really talented. She finally is getting a new show on the air. Of course, with COVID, I don't know if we'll be able to film with an audience this year, but she called me up and I'll do her show. All the things that you work on, you don't know what's going to blossom. So you just keep putting it out there. Just keep putting it out there. If you stop, nothing happens. But if you just keep going and are faithful, somehow things manage to work out. So I do sincerely believe it's got a lot to do with how you live your life, but a lot of it has to do with just keep the work going, and it will come back. If I just sat here and just got depressed, I wouldn't be moving forward. I think it's that forward movement that really helps, and it helps me psychologically. I don't knock myself out. Today, my wife and I went swimming. It's great so you work out, you stay healthy, and you eat right. And I think by the time this is over, I will look back and see that I produced a great amount of material during this downtime. And I think, that good things happen and come out of negative situations. And if you have time, I can give you a couple examples. I don't have to, but this comes from the Corona Diaries, because I looked up what good things come out of negative situations.
yeah.
There's so many. There was another plague that was going on when Sir Isaac Newton was in college. he was sent home from Cambridge, and he used that time to come up with calculus. And he discovered the theory of gravity during that time, and because he was using his off time to come up with things. And so out of a crisis came basically a lot of our modern math came from Sir Isaac Newton. Albert Einstein is another great example. This is the guy who was only allowed to be a theoretical physicist because he lived in pre-World War I Germany. He was a Jew, and they wouldn't let him be a practical physicist. So he could only do it in theory. Well, the great thing was, because of that, they may have intended it for evil, but God intended it for good, because he used his imagination to come up with the theory of relativity. He discovered that planets bounce. He came up with so many great ideas that if he had to prove them, he might not have brainstormed as much as he did and used the imagination that he had. So I think our world, I know our world is totally different because of the genius of Albert Einstein. So there are always these examples of things. This is the worst thing that could happen. Oh, look what came out of it. Gosh, in early Roman times, babies were left by the river to die. And Christians saw this and saw this plague going on with basically just abandoned kids. And they started the first orphanages. In the Black Plague, worst thing you could possibly happen. Christians started the first hospitals. So positive things come out of negative situations. And the most negative of all time is the Holocaust, the horrible, horrible thing that happened to the Jews in Germany. But from that point, Jews have been wandering for 2,000 years, said never again. This will never, and the whole world agreed with them. And so the state of Israel was formed. It could not have been formed without a tragedy as big as the Holocaust, I don't think. They've been trying for 2,000 years to get back to their homeland. But something good came out of a negative situation. So look at your life, realize that, yeah, it's crappy right now. There's no doubt about it. But it makes you stronger. You just keep going with faith. And I believe when we look back in a 2020 kind of faith, we're going to see a lot of good things came out of this.
Nice. Wow. How about that, friends? Huh? Aren't you glad you listened to this? This is good stuff. This is good stuff. Yeah, and we'll add you to the list of all of people who produce good things out of bad situations. You're going to be on that list, okay? Right there with Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein. How about that? Friends, I am so glad you got to meet my friend Robert G. Lee. He is awesome. Yes. Okay, again, your comedy class, info at what?
Info at robertglee.com.
Okay.
That's contact me directly about the next class that'll start up in October.
Okay.
And then if they want to go to Facebook or Twitter or anything else, just go to robertglee.com. On the internet, www.robertglee.com.
The links are there.
The links are there.
Links are there, man. Because he's worth listening to, right? Good stuff. And you didn't even have to pay for this. Wow, this is so good. But have him. Hire him for one of your functions, right? They can hire you.
They can.
He's good, man. Always hits a home run, this guy. Teach a class, whatever. He can do lots of stuff. Take a class.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, friends. Glad you got to meet him. Robert G. Lee, he's awesome. And so are you for watching, everybody. And until next time, everybody, be cool.